Hi, everyone. This is Stuart, Victor Echo 9, Charlie Foxtrot, and welcome back to the Ham Radio Insights, part of our YouTube channel, where I bring in very, very interesting people from around the ham radio community to talk about, things I knew, things I didn't know. We all learn something from these videos that we do. Today, I have Bobby Graves, KB5 HAV, joining us from Mississippi, I do believe. I think that's where you're at, right, Bobby? Mississippi?
That's correct. That's correct.
In Mississippi a couple of times in my life, more on the coast. I remember taking my son to the Gulf Coast there for what did we have? We had some shrimp, and we did a gator tour. It was a lot of fun that day. We were in New Orleans and took a trip over there. And but I have a hurricane story, but I don't think we made it to Mississippi. But I'll tell you that when we get to it. So anyway, Bobby, welcome to the program. Thanks for coming. You know what? I always start the show off with learning about your past at ham radio, how you got started at ham radio, what keeps your interest today. What are the people who don't know who you are? What do they need to know about you?
I'm just a guy here from deep south of the United States, here, born and raised here in Mississippi. Now, I got my start in radio, I guess, like a lot of folks did, through CB radio when I was a teenager. I had one in my car going back and forth to college and what have you. Then throughout the career, going into the different jobs I had, whether I was working on office equipment or working on medical equipment, depending on the job I had at the time. I usually have my CB radio with me and going, and every now and then you want to get a new radio. I was at the store one day and it has one that said LSB and USB on it. What the heck is that? And discovered upper sideband, lower sideband, and opened up a whole new world. Discovered more things on there. And I told my boss about it one day at work when I was working in the medical field. He said, well, if you really like that, drop by to my house tonight. I said, I got something you might be really interested in. I didn't know he's a ham operator. Walked into this shack. This was back in early 1988. Had an old Kenwood TS520. And in the backyard had a 60-foot Roan 25 tower with a high gain TH6DX8. Big old 6-element tri-band, which I own now and I love that. But he aimed the thing to a little bit just north of the east, and was dialing in some stations. And I said, well, where are these folks from? And he said, well, if you go by their call sign, it gives you a pretty good idea where they're from. This is one station coming in. And I said, where's he from? He said, he's from Germany. I said, well, can we talk to him? Sure. And he told me, here's how you go back and let me use this call sign. And lo and behold, first call, he came back right back, and that hooked me. And then when I started studying to get my license, I got to looking into about FCC Part 97 and all, the history of ham radio and all that stuff, and saw that the major basis in the very opening paragraphs, sort of paraphrasing, is to have a pool of trained operators that can help during a time of emergency. I said, I like that. I would love to get into emergency services. Within a month or two, after having get my ham license, I got my license in the summer of 88. And then August of 88, I was traveling through Arkansas, coming through near Little Rock, on town on either side. One was called Conway, another was called Search, working at some hospitals there. And while I was going to the first one, I tuned in on HF, and I was already doing making a lot of contacts on 10 meters. But, I kept thinking, what's in store for me when I upgrade to my general class? I switched over to 20 meter band, was dialing around, and came across this net that was operating on 14.325. It's a Hurricane Watch net. And they were working Hurricane Gilbert as it's hitting Jamaica. I said, man, this is cool. I like that. And then later in that day, sort of take a line from Gilligan's Island, the weather started getting rough. So I started trying to find out what's going on with weather. Of course, you got to consider back then, we didn't have satellite TVs, no cell phones or anything. And what was on, whatever you found on AM radio or FM radio or 2 meters. And I finally found some guys on 2 meters. They were running this thing called Skywarn. And I fell in love with that. So I didn't know you could do this on ham radio. Well, when I got back to where I was, back home the following day in Jackson, Mississippi, I stopped by our local office of the National Weather Service and asked them, I said, what's this? Do y'all know anything about this program called Skywarn? I said, yes, sir. We've been trying to get this thing going for a few years now. It's sort of, it gets going, but then falls apart. And I said, well, what is it y'all need? He said, that's the question I've been waiting for. And within a couple of months, we actually helped with a couple of my buddies of mine. We actually created Central Mississippi Skywarn. So that's what got me in the weather part. But then later on, when health got me toward the end of 1998 and then going into early 1999, when I was diagnosed with a extremely rare form of spinal cord cancer. It's a tumor. It's still in my spine, unfortunately, in this area of my back. What was happening is the tumor in the spinal cord is so big it caused the spinal cord to swell up and fill up the entire cavity of the T6 vertebrae. The brain produces a certain amount of spinal fluid a day to cushion the brain and go down the spinal column to nourish the spinal cord. Spinal fluid had nowhere to go. It was putting back pressure on my brain, causing me to lose my hearing, a bunch of other problems. So basically, it was killing me. And the surgery they did kept me alive, of course. I had a ton of side effects, still dealing with a lot of them. But the doctors would never let me return to work. And I said, I've got to do something. I've got to be involved doing something. And toward the end of 99, I said, I got this tower. I've got a radio and a nice beam. Got to be something I can do on ham radio. And all of a sudden, I remembered Hurricane Watch Net. And I signed up to them, and lo and behold, they were needing somebody to do their website. It was under construction at the time, and they learned my abilities of website development and turned it over to me immediately. So I've been running the website for the Hurricane Watch Net since the early 2000, and I joined them and became a net control operator. And as they say, the rest is history.
So that always intrigues me, because where I live here in New Brunswick, people think, oh, Canada, you guys don't get hurricanes up there. Yeah, we do. Hurricane Fiona just happened to come through just before I moved back here, because I was living in Florida at the time. Of course, I'm well aware of hurricanes in Florida. Mm-hmm. My wife and I were in Sebring, Florida, when Hurricane Irma hit.
Oh, yeah.
Lucky enough for us, that was the only one that kind of gave us a direct hit. But she wanted to leave, so we ended up going to where did we go? Out in Alabama, just on what's on the coast there in Alabama? Mobile, Alabama. Mm-hmm. The only hotel we can get was the Quality Inn and Suites, and there's nothing quality about the Quality Inn and Suites other than the name. But
exactly what are you talking about?
All the FEMA guys were there, and it was we were there for 8 days until I got a notice on my phone that the power was back on, mm-hmm. and we were able to go back home. But that was our own one and only hurricane that was more of a direct hit. We had no damage, thank goodness. We just lost a couple of post caps off our fence. Other than that, we were spared pretty good. But the rest of Sebring got hit pretty hard. We got brushed by Dorian and a few others, but nothing severe. And of course, we come up here, and Fiona happens just before we move up here full time. So Canada gets hurricanes as well. Tell me, I understand the premise of it, but what is the core purpose of the Hurricane Watch Net? You mean you guys aren't running all the time, are you?
Unfortunately, we're not. We're more of a seasonal net. I like to sort of consider us like that of a volunteer fire department, if you will. Fire departments, whether it's a volunteer or an everyday deal, you never know when the alarm's going to happen, right? Same way with hurricanes. We never know what they're going to happen. We know at the time of year to possibly expect them, even though it runs from in the Atlantic, June 1st to November 30th. The core of hurricanes usually start forming toward the end of August to maybe the first part of October. That's your peak season. But still, it can happen anytime. In fact, I've even seen tropical cyclones develop in April. In fact, there was one year I had one still going into January, and that was back in 2006, coming off that heavy 2005 season. But what we do is when there is a storm, whether it's a tropical storm or hurricane, and it's within 300 miles of landfall, we start preparing to activate. And when I mean activate, we're on the air calling and collecting weather data from those in the affected area. Plus, we're also reading out the latest advisories from the Hurricane Center. Why do we read the advisories? Here in the United States and possibly there in Canada, most people have access to the latest advisories through regular media. That's not quite the case in the Caribbean and Central America. A good case in point would have been 2016 when Hurricane Matthew was not Matthew. Doggone it. The storm was getting ready to hit. Yeah, that's correct. Matthew getting ready to go towards Haiti. At the time, when it first developed, just in the Caribbean, it grew up quickly to a Category 5 hurricane, but it stalled south of Haiti, right near the Venezuela-Colombian border. And then all of a sudden, it turns and goes north and hits Haiti as a Category 4. Well, before we activated, there's 3 hams I know in Haiti, and I emailed all 3 of them. And within 5 minutes, one of them picked up the phone and called me international long distance. He said, Bobby, and you could hear tears in his voice. He said, Bobby, I just want to say thank you. And these words are embedded in my brain forever. He said, Bobby, I just want to say thank you for loving on us. He said, we didn't know there was a hurricane out there, much less a Category 5. He said, but thanks to you, we've alerted our nationwide network through ham radio, through VHF and UHF to start doing our best to get prepared for this storm. Of course, the storm, hit as a Category 4, killed about 500 some odd people. But what was so more dangerous about the storm that a lot of folks don't realize is Haiti got rocked by that huge earthquake back in 2010, if you remember. From what I understand, someone with the UN that came in to help with the aftermath was sick and introduced cholera to Haiti, and that spreads like wildfire. And one of the guys, when we checked in after the storm had left, just to check up, because there's more to the whole story, but for time's sake, I'll try to condense things down. But one of the hams I know, he's a priest that works at orphanages there. He said, Bobby, I hate to report, but we lost 25 kids today. The next day, maybe 10 or 15. But, that was just from the cholera, not from the damage from the storm. But what happened was, due to all that flash flooding, the mudslides caused by it just caused it to spread like wildfire. So, but at any rate, we're there for when the storm hits, and even afterwards, especially on these major hurricanes. Sometimes it may be lucky there's only one storm a year, or sometimes we don't even have to activate. Kind of like 2006, there was no landfalling storms that year. 2013, no landfalling storm. Hopefully we'll have a season this year like that, but I'm not going to hold my breath, because like I always tell a lot of folks, when it comes to Mother Nature, by the time you have her figured out, she changes her mind. And it's not an exact science. It's kind of like with medicine. Even lawyers will tell you it's not an exact science. That's the reason why I say we're practicing.
Yeah, one of the questions I was going to ask you is how, even in today's world where we have all this new technology, we have, and I'll get into Canada's dumb decision in a few minutes, but, you have all this new technology where you get weather alerts on your phones, and you got 24-hour weather channels on TV. I used to have a joke, Bobby, where if Jim Cantore showed up in your town, it was going to be a bad day.
Right? The other day.
Yeah, because wherever he always went to the bad storms. In Canada, in their infinite wisdom, I don't know what politician in Ottawa decided this stupid move, but they decommissioned our national VHF alerting system. So we used to go just like the US has 162.55, those in a range of frequencies. We had the same thing. And March 16th, they turned it off, thinking that everybody has a cell phone. Well, no, not everybody has a cell phone. If I'm hiking in the woods, they don't have cell coverage. I bring my weather radio, or I bring my handheld 2-meter, and I can get on the weather channels there and just see what the weather is like for the area. My question was going to be about relevance for you guys, because, with all the new technology, but you kind of answered it, that a lot of these Caribbean countries and Central America don't have access to the same technology that we have.
No, they don't. And there's a lot that are in the Caribbean. They may not be ham radio operators, but they do have shortwave radios. And since 1965, that's when the Hurricane Washington was born. It was on Labor Day weekend of 1965. Over the years, people in the Caribbean have learned when there's a storm threatening that the Hurricane Washington is activated on 14.325 and on 7.268 at nighttime, or when conditions warrant and require, especially when you got a lot of solar flare activity going on, and 20 meters almost dead, you can make sure you can count on it that we'll be on the air during the daytime on 40 meters. But there's a lot of commercial radio stations, individuals at home. They got the little portable shortwave radios that they're listening on. Some may be ham operators, but they're just not licensed to transmit. I still like to tune in and listen. Or they may be able, there's all kind of ways, but it's where they get their latest from. They find their ways to get the latest information out of the United States, whether it's through ham radio or whatever. And they replay that on their local AM, FM station. The reason I know that, I get emails from folks in those locations, whether a storm actually affects them or not, just saying, thank you for being there. That's how we found over the past number of years, I guess about the past 5 or 6 or so, all these web SDR sites are popping up on the internet. A lot of folks are retransmitting what we've got, or you can dial on that SDR to find the hurricane net, and they find ways to do that as well. But yeah, you're right. I don't know why people are getting so locked in of saying, well, I've got this cell phone here. I can do all kind of stuff on it. That's all fine and dandy until you have strong enough winds. It either knocks that cell phone tower over, or it may still be standing up. I've got a picture out. I wish I could show. I don't have it logged in on this one. But the antennas on that tower can get all damaged. And that cell phone tower, for all intents and purposes, is dead. If it's enough rain or maybe flooding coming up, it may have knocked down the power to it. They may not have emergency power to that thing. Anyway, once that goes down, or even your local telephone lines go down, or power lines, telephone lines go down, these things are no longer any good. That's the beauty of ham radio. Ham operators have a way of getting on there, because a lot of us, we have battery power to keep us going in case we do lose commercial power. Even though, hey, you may be in a hurricane area and you may have took your tower down to be prepared for the storm, but folks find ways to put antennas in their attic. Or maybe you just string one on the ground like some guys do in Bermuda from time to time. It's just a 40-meter antenna 3 feet off the ground, but guess what? We can talk to them. And it helps. So, and that's where ham radio really comes into play and really shines, because when they're kind of like the ARRL came out a number of years ago, and they said, when all else fails, ham radio, we're here. But I'm trying to doing my best to retrain people, whether that goes out or not, we're still here. And whether, we don't want to be the last thing you think about, but if we are, hey, we're still here. So.
Yeah, and that's really good. I've never been one to get too involved in the emergency service side of ham radio, more of a contester and a DXer, but I appreciate the work that you folks do. And trust me, if there was a hurricane coming up the East Coast and hitting the Maritimes of Canada, I would be on 14.325, offering my, recommend, and at least an update of what's going on here. Mm-hmm. I think we're kind of sheltered here where I am, at least, because we're 100 miles away from the Bay, probably 70 miles away from the Bay of Fundy, and except for Fiona that came around and came back and hit us from the north, most of them come up through the Bay of Fundy and kind of skirt up that way, and we may get it is great. The storms are usually diminished to the point where they're not even a Category 1 by the time. But Fiona was a different story. Mm-hmm. Came around Nova Scotia and hit us from the north side. Again, that doesn't happen very often. So I have a fond appreciation for the work that not only guys like you do in the Hurricane Watch Net, but all the emergency services. Because again, ham radio is I said the last line of defense sometimes when it comes to this kind of stuff. So it's very, very important to have. So you mentioned the Hurricane Watch Net has been around since 1965. You've been involved with it for at least a quarter of a century, and maybe a little bit longer. What is your fondest memory of something on the Hurricane Watch Net where you can sit back and go, we did good?
That's just about after every single storm. But if there's one that was to stand out to me, it would have to go back to Hurricane Matthew in 2016, and it was for this. For as long as I've been in ham radio, I've had a lot of folks, whether it be hams, not hams, family members that didn't really understand ham radio. They say, well, why do you spend so much time with that Hurricane Watch Net? It's just a hobby. And with that, my response is, when did helping people ever become a hobby? If helping people is a hobby, I think you need to rethink the idea of what helping people is. I love ham radio. There's so many things you can do. I love the contesting too, whether it's even doing voice, rack use, digital operations. I go back to the part way back when RTTY was real hot and heavy. Amtor, I don't know if you ever worked Amtor. Pactor. I don't know that past, at least the past 20 years, the biggest thing is going to sound card type programs like PSK 31 and things of that nature. But I'm so of the older school where I had to use the old TNCs and but that was some neat operations back then. Used a little bit of extra bandwidth and took a little finessing, but to me it was a lot of fun. Even working satellites with a handheld VHF radio and a little aero antenna. There's so many things you can do with it. But what I would highly encourage anybody to find something, get into it, learn the most you can out of it, because there's all other things in ham radio you can pull that from to help on something else. One of the biggest things, I'll come back around to, I'm going in a circle here, I'm going to come back to it. But even like with the beauty of ham radio, people think, well, it's still outdated. It's like dinosaurs. Let me tell you, like on all your cars made by GM, General Motors, on your mirror has a little blue dot with a white cross in it called OnStar. Guess where that came from? Ham radio. It used APRS tied into the cell phone systems using GPSs, and it's all the derivative of ham radio. So, and you may be the next person that has the next best idea to help, society. They all came from ham radio. Anyway, getting back around to this, so many things we can do with it, but helping people is where I love it. When it all came to fruition was when Matthew was getting ready to go make that turn and finally start going towards Haiti. I received a phone call from the head of U.S. Army Mars, which is military affiliated radio service. And he said, he introduced himself, Mr. Graves, that's who I am. And I'm responding in direct response to the gentleman I respond to or work with in the Department of Defense. Okay, my head said, okay, that's the Pentagon. Yes, sir, you have my attention. I didn't say that part, but yes, sir, what can I do for you? He said, well, y'all are very aware of Hurricane Matthew heading towards Haiti, and it's not looking good. And he says, we're trying to we need to find a way to learn what the storm is doing, where the heaviest parts are hit, ports of entry, what's going on inland, because we're trying to put together a humanitarian aid package. So once the storm is gone, we can come in there and start helping the people. And I said, okay, hang on. We're going to start feeding you some data. So, and it wasn't that many hams we had there. Like I said, I only had 3, but we started feeding data in left and right. I said, how do y'all do doing this? I said, we just give you what you asked for. Long story short, the next day after Matthew's done moved out of the way, he calls me back up again. I said, Mr. Graves, I just want to say thank you on behalf of the Department of Defense and U.S. Army Mars. He said, we weren't expecting to get this type of information. In fact, the information he gave us is, well, it's allowing us to do more than we even had planned. He said, leaving right now at this particular moment in time from the ports in Virginia are 3 Navy ships heading out with water, the means to make water, food, medical supplies, medicine, boots on the ground. He said they're not little ships either. One of them's an aircraft carrier, the USS George Washington. Said another one's another flat top. It's not an aircraft carrier, it looks like one. It carries helicopters on it. It's the USS Iwo Jima, same one that picked up the Apollo and Gemini astronauts back in the 60s. And the other one's the USS Mesa Verde. And he said they're on their way. And I let the guys in Haiti know, be expecting in a few days. You may not ever see anything, but you may hear some helicopters. And sure enough, they were there. But when he got through with that, I'm not going to lie to you. When I hung up the phone, I actually just leaned over our couch and I cried like a baby. I said, for years I've had people saying, well, it's just a hobby, Bobby. What good are you really doing? And then when you have something like that happen, we're reaching people. And I'm real humble about that. And I don't want to ever sound braggadocious on that. That's not me. But at least lets me know we're making a difference. It may not be much to some, but every little bit helps. And we're there, like I said, we're trying to be whatever we can, not only before the storm, during the storm, but even after the storm to do what we can. Because every one of these things, they're different. Some people think, well, I got a storm coming in, but unless it's a category 3 or stronger, I don't need to worry about it. Some people say, well, it's just a tropical storm. That's just an overglorified thunderstorm, right? I'd like to remind folks, look back at the history of a storm in 2001 called Tropical Storm Allison. It hit Houston, Texas, and stalled there, kind of like Harvey did a few years back. Some 40 some odd inches of rain on the city. Thousands upon thousands lost their home. Downtown Houston was flooded, business flooded. $5.5 billion of damage in 2001. Thunderstorm? And even still, even when these things start moving further inland, think, well, I'm inland. I don't have to worry about it. These are just coastal events. Remember Helene in 24? It moved into the Carolinas, dumped a lot of, it was a Hurricane Hugo in 89. It hits Charleston, South Carolina. It's still a Cat 1 when it's to reach the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. And it's still a tropical storm when it gets to Cleveland, Ohio, causing all kind of problems. So, just because these things make land doesn't mean it's over with. If you're in the path of it, you need to be watching out for it.
Oh, 100%. Now, Matthew, after Haiti, didn't it skirt up the west coast of Florida?
That one caused us, it went over western Haiti, came across the eastern tip of Cuba, and then right up the coast of Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, before it made a right hook and went on out to sea. Yeah,
I remember because I was actually going to Houston at that time for a work meeting. Mm-hmm. And I was watching the flight track, and we went like up to Tennessee from Orlando to come into Houston. And I thought, there's something big happening. And that's when I found out it was, and then actually I cut my trip short. I cut my trip. It was actually on the way back. I cut my trip short and came back, and we went up that way because I wasn't sure. My wife was at home by herself with the dogs, and I was in Houston. I wanted to get home before, if anything, because these things can make a turn at any time, right?
We can.
And that's what we saw with Irma. And in the 3 o'clock in the morning, that's when we decided to leave and drive to Mobile, Alabama, and camp out there for 8 days. I learned a lot. You learn a lot from these storms and different experiences, right? So what I learned from after Irma was I never want to have never be without power ever again. So I immediately put in a Generac at my house in Florida. Mm-hmm. Come back to Canada. First thing I did in my house, and at the first house we had in here in New Brunswick, we put a Generac in, and then at this house here we have a 26 kilowatt Generac. So I'll never be without power. And if that thing happens to fail because we run out of propane, I got 100 amp hour batteries galore here that I can power something. So I just never want to be without power. That's my biggest fear. Besides fire, having no power for a long period of time is my biggest concern. I'm really scared to death of fire for some reason. I had a friend of mine. I was telling somebody the other day. I had a friend of mine who was a full-time RVer. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I sold my house in Florida, and we were living in an RV, and we were traveling around the southeastern part of the U.S. And his RV burnt to the ground in a matter of 10 minutes. It was gone.
Man.
And this was a $2 million Newell coach.
Goodness.
It was a high-end coach, right? And I said, if that one can go up that fast, so I actually we were in Arcadia, Florida. I remember having the fire suppression people come in and put these fire suppression tubes that if it heated up, it would pop and put this gas over the flames and knock it out. Anyway, back on track here. hurricanes and stuff. I don't know what side of the equation people are, and it doesn't really bother me if you're pro or against global warming. No, this is not about that. But there is some truth that storms are getting more intense and more frequent, and it could just be how the weather patterns go, right? Having people like the Hurricane Watch Net there is essential because we may never see another year where we don't have landfall storms. It maybe. We hope we do, but we can always be prepared, hope for the best. What's the saying? Prepare for the worst and hope for the best, right?
Exactly.
How many people would get involved with okay, we got a storm coming to the coast of Florida. How many people would be involved with that on a regular basis?
Just about our entire network of members, unless somebody is already notified ahead of time. Well, hey, during this time, I'm away on vacation, or hey, for some reason your equipment's down, or different things. We have 100% of our members participate to help out. It may be a storm like say for discussion purposes in Florida. Okay, those that we have in Florida cannot be a net control operator because they're in the affected area. So now they become reporting stations. But of course, we need a lot more reporting stations than what we have now, and we're doing our best to encourage everybody. And we have reason we have as many as we have. Right now we have right at 60 members with the Hurricane Watch Net. We're scattered across 22 U.S. states, 2 locations in Canada, one in Bermuda. We've got stations in Honduras, Aruba, and of course Puerto Rico, and Venezuela. And it allows us to have all kind of coverage propagation. There's sometimes propagation moves east and west, and switch go out north and south. And then there's times when the bank conditions are really rough during the bottom end of the solar cycle, we sometimes get what I call 3-way propagation. Okay, what do you mean by 3-way propagation, Bobby? I hadn't heard about that. There may be times where me as net control, I'm being heard in the affected area. So like I'm in northeast Mississippi, and we say like maybe trying to work Puerto Rico. Well, people in Puerto Rico are hearing me like crazy, but I can't hear them. So I've got a friend maybe in Austin, Texas. He hears Puerto Rico just fine, but they can't hear him. That's what I mean by 3-way.
Gotcha.
So what we do is then when we activate, we have a online private chat room where we can type in the background and talk to all of our different net controllers. And if done right, nobody even knows that. I think we got good propagation between all of us. So, I may not be able to hear him, but, in different ways. But that's where teamwork comes into play. And also the time when information may be coming hot and heavy. So the net control operator, he's trying to get all the data. And we also have what we call a relay scribe, where they're writing down everything and typing it into a database. And from that also gets sent directly to the forecasters in the Hurricane Center. And of course, if there's a storm affecting Canada, since 2014, we now have a working relationship with the Canadian Hurricane Center there in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Of all things, when we became partners at the Hurricane Conference in Orlando that year, didn't know within a few months we're going to be working Hurricane Arthur, going right towards Halifax. So, and we worked a number of storms, including like the recent one was Fiona and a bunch of others as well. So hopefully it'll be a quiet year. But there again, and I know the biggest thing is coming out this year. They're trying to hammer down the idea of a super El Nino. Okay, a lot of folks ask, well, what is El Nino? First, let's stop and think a minute. For a tropical cyclone, okay, what do you mean by tropical cyclone? We're talking about tropical wave, tropical depression, tropical storm, hurricane, the whole genesis of it. There's 4 ingredients you need to have a tropical cyclone. One, you need to have sea surface temps at least 80 degrees or higher. I forget what that converts to in Celsius, but 80 degrees Fahrenheit. You then need to have stable air. What do I mean by stable air?
No shear, nothing like that, right?
Yeah, no wind shear. All layers of the atmosphere needs to be nice and steady, nice and calm. It's heavy from one direction and you start coming in another direction, that's wind shear. Or maybe calm here, but here is real rough, and the next layer, that's wind shear. Then you get a low pressure system. Also, you need to have moist atmosphere. What I mean, water in that. A lot of folks hear what's called the Saharan dust layer. That's when you get a lot of winds coming off of the Saharan desert there in Africa, and it just literally blows dust in the atmosphere. And it can reach all the way to the United States and Canada. And you get all that going, well, that disrupts the whole system. All it takes is one to mess it up. But as long as you can get a nice area with all those ingredients come together, you'll get a tropical cyclone. The problem is La Nina means less wind shear in the Atlantic. El Nino means more wind shear in the Atlantic. More wind shear, less storm. I forget what the average is right now, but I think it's 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 become major hurricanes is the 30-year average. Dr. Phil Glocksback a couple of weeks ago gave his first forecast of the year with 13 named storms, 6 hurricanes, and 2 major hurricanes. That's just one less. Why people are getting so excited? We don't have to worry about hurricanes this year. Did you not hear what the storms are? 13, 6, and 2. Still, it only takes one, like Andrew in 1992, to make a landfall. It was a big one.
Or Katrina was a big one.
Katrina was a big one. Yeah. Of course, there was more in that same year with Katrina. Katrina hit me, and it hit me hard where I was at, and I'm 150 miles. Where I was living at the time, I was 150 miles inland, and it messed me up for 3 solid weeks, but nothing like it did the folks on the coast. But yeah, all it takes is one. And it has to be the one in your backyard too. And there again, it could just be a tropical storm. But if this one hits your backyard and causes all the flooding, here's another thing too. I want to make sure people understand as well. A lot of folks think, well, unless it's this type storm, I don't have anything to worry about. Remember Allison? It dumped 40 inches of rain, 40+. It's the water. It's the water content that's coming. Yeah, the wind can do a lot of damage. Yeah, and that's people get all excited. Well, it's 150 mile per hour, 160, 170, like it did with last year with Melissa hitting Jamaica. Yeah, the wind can do a lot of damage, but look at all the water that was dumped on the country, all the flash floods and mudslides. That's what does the major damage, all the killing, like it did with Helene back in 24 in the Carolinas. It's the flooding, it's the water. And while I'm also thinking about it, if you are in one of these areas, whether it's from hurricanes or whatever, you think, well, I've lost power. I've got this gasoline generator. I'm going to crank it up so I've got some power. Leave that sapsucker outside. Run extension cord from that to the inside. Back in 2020, during Hurricane Laura that hit the Lake Charles area of Louisiana, southwestern Louisiana, there was a number of people that died from carbon monoxide poisoning because they kept the generator inside. They didn't want somebody stealing it. Don't risk your life and that of your family. Leave it outside. If you're worried about stealing at night, leave it off at nighttime. You don't need it at nighttime anyway. You need it in the daytime, if anything, I guess. But take care of that.
Common sense has to prevail, right? That's the thing. And so, Bobby, how does somebody get involved with the Hurricane Watch and how wants to become a member? They maybe have some interest. They live here in the Maritimes of Canada or along the eastern coast of the United States or in the Caribbean. They say, I'm really inspired with what you have to say. How do I get involved?
If you'd like to learn more about what we're doing, especially we'd love to become a net control operator and help us out, just visit our website, hwn.org. And over on the top left-hand navigation bar, you'll find a link that says net control information. Click that link. I've got some information that tells you about more in depth of who we are, what we do as part of a net control or relay scribes. And then after that, if that inspires you even more, then go on link from there, carries you to the application page. But let me say this, if you just want to be a relay, you don't have to be a member just to be a relay or just report weather. Please, if it's affecting your area, please come to us. Why do we need weather reports? And it's this. We have the satellites. It gives us great information. I mean, you stop and think about it. The latest versions of the NOAA satellites we have, if need be, can update every 30 seconds, whether it's using the high definition visuals that are just awesome at times, using the infrared so you can see what's going on at nighttime, different color scopes that they have there. That's just one part of the pattern. You have the hurricane hunters that go into the storm, fly around above and even into the eye of the storm. They drop what they call a drop sign. It's a tube about 2.5 feet long, about 4.5 inches in diameter. When they drop it out, there's a little parachute comes out and it picks up barometric pressure, wind speeds and temperatures and all other kinds of stuff all the way down to the surface. And then we also have the Doppler radar. When the storm close enough, they're scanning the skies, trying to see what's going on. These forecasters are using all that data to try to figure out what's going on at the surface. They don't tell you what's going on at the surface. As the storm gets, we may have some remote weather stations, but as they get in, as the storm gets closer, we may start losing those networks. This is where you as the spotter come into play. You are the second half of that equation, because without you, guess what? The forecasters only have that information and their best guess. The spotters remove all doubt because it's telling you exactly what the storm is doing, where it's happening at, how bad it is. And it could take just one report that lets that forecaster know, from that location, we weren't expecting the winds to be that strong. We may need to be adjusting our warning path a little bit more to a different direction. We may to extend other warnings, storm surge, things of that nature. One report can make a huge difference. So, but now for being that control operator, we love to get more operators operators as well. So, and when we bring you on, we just don't say, okay, you're a control operator. No, we've got a training program that will bring you through to bring you up to speed on the online tools that we use, help you get used to what we're doing, because there again, we're not a daily net. We are a seasonal operation. We jump in when the alarm goes off. In other words, there's a storm out there. It may last a day. It may be a Matthew or maybe a Dorian where, hey, we're on the air 24 hours a day for 6 days or more. It may be a season where like 2005 or 2020. We just got through the storm. It only lasted a couple of days, but guess what? There's another storm. And wait a minute, there's another one. I'm not gonna lie, there's some years it will wear you out. But then when you look back at it, you try to think, well, it may not seem like it, but you got to help a lot of people out. You help the forecasters at the Hurricane Center. You help a lot of government agencies out with that information, because they get that information as well, so they can know the areas that are hardest hit. So when the storm is past, they know where to try to get in the quickest and get the help where it's needed. So look at case in point, like Ian, that you went through. During that storm, there were a couple of reports that came in where buildings had collapsed and people were trapped. The only way we knew about it, and that the fire departments and other rescue agencies would know about it, came through ham radio. Why? The telephones were down. Cell phone service was down. But during the eye, people got to try to check on people. And there again, got to be careful during the eye storm, because, yeah, it gets calm. The only problem is you don't know when the backside of the eye is coming in. And so like if you got 120 mile per hour sustained winds, that wind's not going to slowly build up to 120 miles per hour. It's going to come in from 0 to 120. And whatever's loose on the ground will become a flying obstacle. And if it hits you, it's not going to be an owl. So be careful.
Yeah. I remember Ian, when I wasn't there at the time, I was already gone, but the campground that we stayed at Arcadia was totally underwater. Mm-hmm. So it was, and I had a friend of mine who had a vacation home in Punta Gorda, I think it was, and he lived in Fort McMurray, Alberta, so 3,000 miles away, 4,000 miles away, and he couldn't get down there to see what happened with his property. So one last question, because down on the ground, right? We may not have, especially with if the front of the storm's coming through, you got 125 an hour sustained winds. Your HF system may not be up and running. Is there any way, like on a 2-meter handheld, to report back to you guys?
We have a sister net called the VoIP Hurricane Net. They tie into a lot of your D-Star, Yaesu System Fusion, All-Star, a bunch of those things. Go to, I think it's VoIP, no, it's WXVoIP.net, or you can just do a search for VoIP Hurricane Net. It's hit it up with a good friend of mine, Rob Macedo, KD1CY, and they do a lot of that as well. There again, as long as the internet's up and going for those links to work, they're there. But say, for instance, you have whether you would like to report, whether it's estimate. I mean, we'd love to have measured data, but even if it's estimated, if it's hitting your area, you may, well, hey, I've got a big tree just fell. Hey, I just saw a house get blown away. If you have a friend of yours that's close by who does have HF, and like you say, if you got a handheld, whether it's UHF, VHF, and y'all can sort of work between one another and forward data, please do. Any which way you can get it into us, we appreciate it.
Right. And those frequencies again were 14.325 and 72.85?
7.268.
268. Okay, wonderful. And I know I'm trying to reach out to the Maritime Mobile Net people because I want to have the same kind of discussion with them. And I know they have a bigger challenge because they get a lot of people encroaching on the 14,300 frequency. And I have a very religious belief that frequency is sacred. Nobody should ever operate on it. You know what? That's what I want to talk to them about. Anyway, Bobby, thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate your journey in ham radio, and everything you've accomplished in your life is inspiring to me. And I just met you tonight for the first time, and I have to say, my friend, how you battled what you went through and to where you are now, it's inspiring. So I encourage everybody to go and check out Bobby's QRZ page, read his story, get involved with the Hurricane Net when it comes back on. Hopefully, knock on wood, it doesn't happen this year.
Amen.
But when it does, I'll be definitely, if we ever get something coming up this way, I'll definitely be, reporting in anyways. I'll have to take my hex beam down because I don't think that'll survive a hurricane too much.
They won't survive that. I've got enough.
I don't know if you know K4K, the maker of mine. I told him it survived 7 major windstorms. Like I'm talking 100 kilometer an hour gusts or higher. It survived 7 of them. The last one, the big what do they call it? Nor'easter came up the coast a few months ago.
That was a big storm.
It took out my 15-meter element on the hex beam.
Oh, no.
And it wasn't even his fault. It was because when I was putting it all together, I looked at it and said, that 15-meter element's sagging too much. Let me just tighten it up a bit more. And of course, when the wind hit it and the snow and the ice hit it, it just couldn't flex.
Right.
So the little connector at the cable broke. We put the man lift up there and kicked it, and it was fine. But I'm thinking, I really need a tilt over tower. That's what I need. One of these days, maybe I'll put up maybe I'll just get a 50-foot telescopic mast or something like that.
Or just put a 40-meter dipole up in your attic. I mean, it don't have to be a perfect straight. You can bend it all kind of ways.
The nice thing about my property, I have 5 acres, and my shack is actually 100 feet away from where the house is. So I got this big 2-car garage, and the shack I'm in right now is an old welding shop that I converted to a ham shack when I bought the house. So I have all kinds of room to do things, right?
Right.
So I can throw up wires and tie it out inside if they're inside the trees, they're a little bit more sheltered. So I got lots of flexibility. I got 100-foot high trees here, so I'm pretty blessed that way. Hey, Bobby, thanks for doing this, my friend. I really appreciate it. And give me that website again, just to make sure we got the right website.
Sure, it's hwn.org. Hotel Whiskey November Oscar Radio Golf.
There you go. Go and check out the website. And again, if you're in or out outside of a hurricane area, please get involved, because I think emergency service is part of ham radio. It needs people who are committed to helping others, and that's what ham radio is all about. Bobby, thanks again, my friend. We'll definitely keep in touch, because again, you've inspired me, and I want to definitely help because we're in the East Coast of Canada. We get these storms as well. Oh, one last question. When do you guys wrap things out? Like when is the net shut down?
That's a very good question. Years ago, we were shutting down once the storm was downgraded to a tropical storm. If it's not a major hurricane like Cat 1, Cat 2, we may shut down once it's downgraded to a tropical storm. However, if it is a major hurricane or even with the others, if there's a lot of damage, of course, every storm is different. Each one has its own impact. If it's creating a significant impact, we'll stick around for a while. This definitely on the major hurricanes, we'll be there to gather close storm reports, and maybe folks during the storm wasn't able to say anything. But once the storm has passed, then they can throw up their emergency antennas. Then we know, well, hey, the storm surge got this high. There's a lot of trees down there, buildings down, whatever. We need help at such and such location. That's where we can come in and help out there, is in that post storm. Also, during our activations, I failed to mention this earlier, but when we do activate, the Salvation Army Team Emergency Radio Network, or Saturn, they also work alongside us to help with extra relay operators, but also they're there to help in case anyone in the affected area has any outgoing health and welfare traffic. They're there to get it, and of course, if they can't hear those stations, we're trying to get it, and then we forward it on to them. So even after the storm, once we even shut down, usually Saturn's there to, especially on the major hurricanes, to help with the health and welfare traffic.
Anyway, Bobby, thanks again, my friend. I really appreciate it. I'm Stuart Victor, Echo 9, Charlie Foxtrot. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I want to thank Jerry for introducing me to you, Bobby, and all the great stuff you guys do. Thanks again, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye for now.